My name is Ovide Guesnon. I'm a deacon. Next month I will be ordained 36 years. I happen to have been in the first class of deacons that was ordained for the Diocese of Oakland. It's a pleasure, and I thank you for inviting me, because speaking about annulments is close to a lot of people. All of us know someone, some relative that have been divorced and remarried, etc., and they're unable to receive the sacraments because they are not in a valid marriage. And it's hard for them, for many of them. They'd like to receive the sacrament, but they're prohibited from receiving it. By giving you this information, because a lot of people have erroneous ideas about what an annulment is, or even if they can get an annulment. And by obtaining an annulment, one can be married in the church again, and they can start receiving the sacraments. Before we start talking about what an annulment is, we really have to know what a marriage is. For many people, they think of marriage as a contract, right? How many think of marriage as a contract? Oh, you're wrong, man, you're wrong. Marriage is not a contract, and the reason it's not a contract is because when all the provisions of a contract are completed, then you can get out of that contract.
Till death do us part.
Yeah, but that's not a contract. What marriage is a covenant, and it's different. And we get the whole marriage model of what a marriage is and what a marriage covenant is we get it from God. If you look in the Old Testament, God made a covenant with Adam and Eve. I'm going to be your God. I expect you to do this. Do you want to be with me? I'm going to put you in paradise, and someday I will bring you up to heaven to be with me. And I want you to produce and multiply and fill the earth. God made a covenant with Abraham. I'm going to make you the father of a great nation. He did it with Moses. Take my people, bring them to the promised land. So these covenants God made. Jesus Christ, when he ascended into heaven, what did he do with his apostles? The covenant he made with them. To go out, to preach my word, to go to all nations. So what we have in the covenant is that, number one, you have freedom of choice. God said, I will be your God. Are you willing to be my people? Are you willing to go out and produce and to spread the word? And it will be forever. That is the three essential things with a covenant. And this is what a marriage covenant is all about. That the two people, they have freedom of choice. They are making a lifelong commitment, and they are willing. They are open to having children. That constitutes the marriage covenant. There are some minor things that's in there, but those things can be put aside by the bishop. But the three things, the freedom of choice, the permanency of that marriage, and open to having children is essential. Now, when we talk about marriage, there are different types of marriages. You have what most of us deem is a sacramental marriage. A sacramental marriage is between two baptized persons. It does not necessarily have to be two Catholics. A Catholic can marry a non-Catholic who is baptized, and they are in a sacramental marriage. We have other marriages that are valid marriage or regular marriage, and then we have invalid marriages or irregular marriages. A valid marriage can be, a sacramental marriage is always valid. A valid marriage is not always sacramental. A Catholic marries a non-baptized person. With a dispensation, they can be married in the Catholic Church. They are in a valid marriage, but it is not a sacramental marriage. Two non-baptized persons are in a valid marriage, but they are not in a sacramental marriage. And then we have the irregular marriage, or invalid marriage, is which one of the persons has been previously married, they have been divorced, and they get married in a civil ceremony. That is an invalid or irregular marriage. If you are not in a regular, valid marriage, and you're a Catholic, you're not permitted to receive the sacraments until that is rectified. The church wants all of us to receive the fullness of Jesus Christ, to be able to receive the sacraments. And therefore, what the church has and does is has the court of law, and they will review your marriage and find out what type of marriage you're in. Whether you are in a, if you're in an invalid marriage, what can we do to get you in a valid marriage? And this is what the whole annulment process is all about. A sacramental marriage can never be annulled. That is, two people who are baptized, they have freedom of choice, that they are making a lifelong commitment, and they are open to having children. It can never be annulled. What can be annulled, and what the church does, and the tribunal does, is try to look into the persons, when they got married, at the time of marriage, what was their frame of mind? Is there anything that happened that does not make this bond sacramental? If for any reason were they did not have freedom of choice, Was the girl pregnant at that time and you got married because the girl was pregnant? Was this an arranged marriage? Were you psychologically ready to get married? I've done annulments where one of the couples had a mistress before the marriage, had a mistress during the marriage. Well, that person was not there to make a lifelong commitment to that person. So this is what's looked into to find out. And so, and if anyone, you know anybody in any type of situation, and I have some papers to give out, I'll pass it around, have them go see a priest or a deacon. You know, and each case is individual. There are no two cases that's the same, believe me. You know, when we start answering questions, you know, I can give you general answers, but specific, unless I know all the facts of the case, I couldn't give you specific. Even then, I'd probably have to call the tribunal to get information. Believe me, they're there to help priests and deacons. They have the canon law, they know, they handle hundreds of cases. And they're always there to back us up and to give us advice. But anyhow, there are different types, like I said. With the annulment, that first you come and the person is married outside the church. In a second marriage. They have been divorced and they got remarried and they'd like to return to the sacraments, so they come see a priest or deacon, and what can you do to help me? So what we do is we start talking to them and we start filling out a preliminary form that's sent to the tribunal. What I'm going to do, I've got two folders, and I can send one here. You can look through and then pass it along. And it's some of the forms they have, but it's, first of all, it's a form for marriage. When you first come to get married, you go see the priest or deacon, and you fill out a Form A and a Form B. You fill out the Form A, and you need a witness to fill out the Form B. Everybody has gone through it. You may not remember it, but you filled it out. For me, it's been almost 50 years, and I don't remember doing the paperwork. But anyhow, this form, and these forms are kept. When you fill this paperwork out, when you comply a marriage, they're kept forever. All these paperwork are put in there, and it's kept in there, in this little form, in the church you're married, and they keep it in a very safe place. Because if ever you apply for annulment, this is going to be the first thing they're going to pull out. They're going to want to see this. And they want to check that paperwork to make sure everything was done right. That if you needed a dispensation, if you were a Catholic, first of all, you got to remember, a Catholic is required to marry a Catholic in the Catholic Church. Anything outside of that, you need a dispensation from the bishop. So if you were to marry a non-Catholic, you would have to get permission from the bishop. If you were married to somebody who was never baptized, you need dispensation from the bishop. And all of that goes, fill out the forms, it comes back okayed by the bishop, and all of that's put in there. So, when you go for an annulment, that is pulled out, and all this paperwork is checked out. there are different types of annulments. And that's why I say you have to know the specifics. The one that's, they call it an annulment, but it's not really an annulment, is called a lack of form. And this is the one where a priest or deacon will kiss you. Because it's just paperwork. Remember I said, a Catholic is required to get married in the Catholic Church. Well, what happens, the young couple, they go to Reno, they go see the Justice of Peace, or they go see some minister that somebody knows, and that's where they get married. Well, when they get a divorce later on, they come back, and we see the marriage license that they were not married in the Catholic Church, kiss you. Because we just got to show that you were a baptized Catholic, or one of the parties was a baptized Catholic, that you did not get married in the Catholic Church. Send that paperwork to the bishop, and they sign it. Okay, and that's easy. The formal annulment is when you've gotten married in the church, you've done all that paperwork, and then that's when it works again. There is no time limit on trying to get an annulment. Sometimes it can take years because you've got to have witnesses. You have to have a valid reason, and they will check it out, and if you have a valid reason, then they will accept it, they will take on the case, they will send you more paperwork to fill out, you got to fill out your life history, and this is where a lot of people give up. They don't want to go through the process. For some, it is very hurtful, because it brings up a lot about why your first marriage broke up. And a lot of people don't want to go through that again. It's painful for them. If the priest or deacon is doing their job, they're helping you to cope with it, to work through it. And it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of prayer. It's not easy. A lot of times it can be frustrating trying to get in touch with witnesses. Sometimes witnesses are spread throughout the diocese or in some other diocese. And the church is required. I think on the last page I have something on there about the cost. That was the last cost that they gave us. And some of the stuff that it goes through with the tribunal. But anyhow, they go through all of this process of talking to witnesses, getting all this information. The amount that you're asked to pay is only a small portion of the actual costs. Because it can get very expensive, especially when they got to go out of the diocese and the other diocese got to do their work. You know, somebody got to pay somebody to do all this stuff. And so the cost goes up. But your cost is minimal. Okay. As I said, you have the lack of form, which is technically not an annulment. You have a formal annulment. In many cases, you have, it's called legamen. And this actually works with a lot of non-Catholics who have been married, divorced, you know, and you've got to go through these different ceremonies, through these different annulments for each person to find out where, if valid marriage exists. You've got to remember that I said baptized persons. 2 non-Catholics are in a sacramental marriage also, not just Catholics. And a lot of non-Catholics are not aware of it. So you'll get a non-Catholic, and I'm the director for our RCIA program. And a lot of times I get non-Catholics who decide they want to become a Catholic. And so I start having them fill out a registration form. And I find out, oh, because I ask them how many times on the form, what marriage are you in? How many previous marriages have you had? 2, 3. Wait a minute. Before you can become a Catholic, and if you are married, again, we have to get annulments for you also. But I'm not Catholic. It doesn't matter. You were baptized, you are, and your spouse was baptized, you're in a sacramental marriage, and we have to show that there is, or try to show, that there is some defect in that sacramental marriage. So, it's not just Catholic. The other thing I get a lot of times is people want to come and get married, and people lie to priests and deacons. Okay? And sometimes they're not even aware they're lying. And this is why we need the little certificate of marriage that you fill out with the county when you get married. Because you don't lie to that clerk, but you lie to priests and deacons. They say, have you been married before? No. And then you're talking to them and they start talking about their ex-husband. Wait a minute. You told me you weren't married. Well, yes, but that wasn't in the Catholic Church. I didn't ask you if you got married before in the Catholic Church. I said, how many times have you been married? 1, twice. Okay, we need annulments before you can become a Catholic, before we can validate your marriage. Validation means that you've been married outside the church and that you now want your marriage blessed and recognized by the church. You want to become into a sacramental marriage. Okay, so anyhow, that's what we get. So that's one of the requirements, that you go and now have the paperwork on that is, as a matter of fact, I'll send them around now, is the information that you need in order to when you put in for an annulment, you need certain paperwork.
That's the paperwork that I need.
Now, another case, a type of annulment besides the formal annulment, is the one called a Pauline privilege.
Grab the extra one. No, I'm not doing this.
I think I got enough. The Pauline privilege is where
That'll be the worst my final decree of divorce.
is where a Catholic has been married to somebody, or if you're non-Catholic, or if you've never been baptized, that you are not in that sacramental marriage. And what you're asking the church to do is to grant an annulment so that the non-baptized person might become a Catholic and enter into a marriage.
Excuse me, anybody else need one?
Okay. You've got a non-baptized person is married. They get a divorce. The non-Catholic, the non-baptized person, they marry a Catholic. Now, they're in an invalid marriage. They come to the priest or deacon and ask they would like to have their marriage blessed. Well, we need to get an annulment for you, or a temp. And the church, for good reasons, and if they have meet all the criteria, can permit that annulment so that the non-baptized person can be baptized, and then they're married in the church. And it's upon being baptized, they are baptized first, then they get married. Okay. The other one is a little trickier, is sometimes called privilege of faith, and some people know it as the Petrine privilege. And this is if one of the persons who's been in, they could even be a valid marriage, because this is technically a divorce that the church is granting, that they've been in valid marriage, so-called, but one has not been baptized. And they ask the church to set aside that marriage so that they might marry the Catholic. And not necessarily, they do not necessarily have to become Catholic.
Say it again? Say it again, you lost me.
Yeah, it gets tricky. That's why I said, you know, every case gets tricky, and you've got to know what you're doing, and it takes time. You know, because it can get, believe me, it gets confusing to me sometimes. You know, and I got my little cheat sheet book here. You know, that explains all this stuff, and then you still talk to the people of the tribunal about it, you know, to make sure you get all the stuff right, because if you don't get it right, they're going to bounce all the paperwork back to you, and then you've got to get it right. Okay? So that's basically it with the annulments. Now, what happens is some people think, and they're wrong in their thinking, that if I get an annulment, are my children illegitimate? No, it has nothing to do with that. All of an annulment says is that you were not in a sacramental marriage. It does not say you were never married. You're still civilly married, and that's legal, but it's not a sacramental marriage. And that's basically it. I have this that I'd like to pass out, and this was done by Father Brian Joyce of the Christ the King Parish many years ago, and it was in the Catholic Voice. This gives the best explanation to the layperson of what a marriage is and what an annulment is. One of the things you've got to remember, and a lot of priests are unaware of it, and I've seen them turn a lot of people away from getting married in the church because one or both of the people have not been confirmed. And they tell you, you can't get married in church unless you've been confirmed. That is totally wrong. Canon law states, and it's canon law 1065-1. Canon law states that when you get married, you should be confirmed. However, for grave reasons, it can be set aside. You can be married for the simple reason. A couple come to me who are not married in church, and one or both have not been confirmed yet. I want to get them back to receiving the sacraments as soon as possible. So, I'm not going to make them wait 1 or 2 years until confirmation comes around to be confirmed. Therefore, yes, enroll in a confirmation class. But we will still convalidate your marriage so that you can go back to receiving the sacraments. And the whole thing is being pastoral. The whole thing is getting people to turn to the Lord. That's what it's all about. Okay, I think I've covered most. Well, I didn't do that.
It happens all the time.
Okay, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. If you have any questions or... Yes, yes.
Who's been writing these notes here?
Oh, the writing in there was done by one of the canon lawyers. I gave it to him to review.
It says it's not true that annulment is not expensive in Oakland. It says here, annulment is not expensive, and he wrote, not true.
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, it all depends on who's talking about the money. Okay, some dioceses is more money. There are a few dioceses in the United States, I know there's one in Texas, that the bishop doesn't charge anybody for annulments. The diocese pick up the whole thing.
So this is pertaining to Oakland Diocese only.
Yeah, I think I have it on that book. The last thing I had on cost was a filing fee of $50. There's an interview fee of $50, and then $400 for the case of a formal annulment. Rest assured, you know, money doesn't really matter, because if you don't have the money, you can make arrangements with the diocese or your parish. You know, I mean, they need some money, but just because you don't have money doesn't mean they can tell you we won't touch your case. It's just to help to defray. Like I said in the beginning, you know, the cost you pay is only a fraction of what the actual cost is. Yes.
Do you have to get an annulment?
Do you have to get an annulment?
Yeah.
For what?
For what?
Well,
Okay, no, oh, okay.
Okay.
Only if you want to remarry.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You answered my question.
Yeah. Yeah. An annulment, as a matter of fact, you don't even put, one of the things when you fill out the forms, they ask you, who do you intend to marry?
Okay.
Because that's what it's for. There is no need, if you have no intention of ever getting married, to get an annulment.
Okay.
Because all annulment says is frees you to remarry. One thing, and I've run into this before, where
There's a catch.
a person has been told because they've been divorced, and even though they did not remarry, they could not go to the sacraments. That is totally wrong.
That's not true. I asked your bishop about that.
If you're divorced, and as long as you do not remarry outside the church, you can still receive the Eucharist.
Or cohabitating, correct?
Pardon me?
Or cohabitating.
Cohabitation is off.
No. That's,
You don't live together.
don't do that.
Okay.
Because you're living in sin. The church says you don't cohabit unless you are. Now, if you cohabit and you're only living as a brother and sister, that's fine. No. sex outside of marriage is a no-no. Yes.
I don't know if my hearing was bad. You keep saying two person. You're not saying
Man and woman. Excuse me. I assume everybody believes in man and woman, yes. Yeah.
No, just kidding.
What if, okay, we're divorced and then we find somebody else
Yes.
and just for companionship, no sex.
No sex?
Can we reunion?
Yes.
Sis,
Okay.
sis, no sexting.
Wait. What stopped you from receiving communion? Sin. If you're not committing a sin, you're free. Yeah, there are a lot of people, you know, for companionship, they live together. But as I said, as long as you're living as brother and sister, that's fine.
Another question.
Deacon Ovide, I'd like to comment on that a little bit because I know everybody laughs about it, but it honestly is a very serious situation, and many people can find great healing and comfort through that situation. And here's a particular scenario, and I in fact know at least one couple who has come up to me and told me about this, is that, you know, they were perhaps in an irregular marriage or some situation, but they're much older now, and they're still living together, but they're not able to get an annulment for some reason or another. Well, that couple can go to confession, confess the sin, make a commitment to each other to live as brother and sister, and they can come to the sacraments. It's a very healing way that the church can minister to people. And I mean, sex is not a necessity for life, and so there are many people who actually could perhaps make that sacrifice. And in the church, it's been historically a sacrifice that's been made even by married couples. In the Middle Ages, there were often times where married couples would forsake sex for the good of the kingdom. They were both they both were liking each other in a good marriage, but they decided that it was better for the kingdom of God for them to live as brother and sister, and in some cases to go off and perhaps become a priest or to go into the convent. And so they made that decision for that reason. So I think it's something to be considered for all of us. You know, not that everybody's going to do that, but there are situations where that can really bring people back to the church.
Yeah. One of the things, being a deacon at Our Lady of Guadalupe, and used to be Santa Paula, St. Leonard's, etc., for so many years, I know a lot of people by sight. And one of the things I have observed, and when I start seeing people not receiving the Eucharist, I'll approach them on the side and try to inquire, why not? I don't make a big deal of it. It's all private. And I found in the past that situation, and I've even gotten a letter from the diocese stating that it was fine because one of them, the woman, had Alzheimer's, and even if they could get an annulment, she wouldn't be free to marry because she couldn't have the freedom of choice. Yeah. So,
She would know she
yeah. But anyhow, you know, the guy lovingly taking care of her, etc., but he wasn't receiving the Eucharist. And so I had to talk to him and said, you know, you can do it, but I'm not married in church. I said, okay, I'll get a letter from the bishop on it. And I got a letter, and I gave it to him, and now he's receiving the Eucharist. But I do this a lot, you know, and if you see people that you know, who are not receiving the Eucharist, you know, either talk to them privately, try to find out why not, and in most cases you'll find is because they have been married previously and they're no longer, no, you can't get an annulment. Okay? But the likelihood of getting an annulment is very good. We have a lot of judges here in this diocese, We have more judges in the diocese than Rome has.
I have a live example. This person married a non-Catholic person back home. She migrated here and remarried with another person in the U.S. They got married in the Catholic Church. They went through the 6 months, answered all the questionnaires, and did the 6 month thing. I don't think they lied about their, she lied about the previous marriage that she had in the Philippines. They still got married in church. Now,
Okay, you don't know all the circumstances.
well,
You don't know if they got an annulment or anything else. See, if they got an annulment, then they're free to marry.
I do, because I do know, because I was a witness. I'm sinful. I witnessed the second marriage.
Yeah, but behind the scenes of it.
They have to show, okay, something got to be missed. That's what I say, you know, I can't answer specific questions without knowing all the details and seeing all the details, seeing that little deal, you know, because you've got to show a marriage license, you know, and like I say, people don't lie to the clerk. You know, when they show you that little marriage license, they got one little box. Number of this marriage. And unless there's a 1 there, if there's a 2, sometimes a 3. I've seen 6. Believe it or not.
One more question.
I didn't finish my thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My question was, which married is sacramental?
The marriage says okay. I don't know all the circumstances to answer that question because they were married in church, et cetera, in another country. They came over here and met somebody else and got married here and left that spouse over there.
No annulment. Are you sure?
No annulment.
Maybe there's a lack of form that was processed.
Well, yeah. Yeah, well,
Not lack of forms.
okay, let's put it this way. If they were sacramentally married before in another country, they came here, did not tell the priest or deacon that they were married before, did not show anything where they were married for, number one, they're not validly married in the second marriage. They're still validly married in that first marriage. They are a bigamist in the eyes of... see, the church don't worry about bigamist. The church says you're not in a sacramental marriage. The state says you're a bigamist. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the whole thing, you know. Unless you tell the priest or deacon all the information, I mean, if you just lie about the whole thing, you know, you're not doing the marriage right anyhow. Yeah.
On filing an annulment, do you contact the other person too?
Okay. In order to get an annulment, you have to have an address, the name and address of the ex, because an annulment for you is an annulment for them. See, they don't have to, they have to be contacted, because if the annulment goes through, then the diocese has to notify them that their marriage is annulled. You are now free to marry somebody else in the church. Now, they will ask the person whether or not you want to cooperate. If they say no, it does not stop the process. It makes it a little harder, but it doesn't stop the process. Yes.
Is the annulment in Oakland valid in all the dioceses, even in other
An
countries?
annulment in a church. Okay, one thing we got to remember, I'm talking about church annulment, not civil. I know in the Philippines,
You cannot.
there's no divorce.
Right.
It's only annulment. That don't count as an annulment in the Catholic Church. You've got to get an annulment here in the church.
What?
And normal Philippines doesn't count.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have an annulment here, it doesn't be recognized in the Philippines.
No. An annulment is recognized in the Philippines because you can get a church annulment in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I'm talking about if somebody who don't get a divorce, they get a civil annulment. Civil annulments we're not talking about. That has nothing to do with the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I think you mentioned one of the reasons why for annulment is psychological reason, where when they get married, they're not psychologically ready.
It could, right.
How can you prove that?
This is where you interview people. See, one of the things on those forms where that you ask, you ask, is there anything else you want to say about this marriage? Okay, I put down, and I've seen other people, other deacons or priests put down, in a little box. At one time, this poor girl, she was so controlled by her mother, it was unbelievable. She didn't do anything. Her mother did everything. Hey, one of these days, this guy is going to get tired of all of this. I'm not marrying my mother-in-law. I want to get married to a wife. And you put this little notation, there is, this girl is controlled by her mother, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when you go for that annulment, they pulled out that little folder and they see that notation that was made. And so they start questioning that. If you've been under doctor's care, from Bentley, they will check that out. See, all that, you read the forms that you got there. There's a lot of questions you ask from both the A form and the B form. And a lot of times, you get some 18-year-old kid that's trying to get away from the house and want to get out, and they're not ready for marriage, even with marriage preparation. Marriage preparation is good, but it's lousy. I've done marriage preparation. They're in love. They don't even hear you. Steve does it all the time. They're in lust. And that's the problem. I'm 18, I'm getting out of this house, I'm getting married. Hey, I'll marry you. We do it in church anyhow. You're not ready for marriage. I was telling them today at the clergy appreciation, after about 10 years, you know you're ready for marriage.
Yeah, I wasn't ready when I got there.
Yeah, I'm going on 50 years. My wife tells me I'm still not ready.
What if you knew all this, like before you consented to marry the guy? You knew he was immature or under the mother's control, but you knew this, but you still married him.
I know, you're going to change him.
No. Just so
Yeah, I know.
with him.
Yeah. I mean, hey,
Now, what I mean, does that make that marriage now
not necessarily. Hey, I know people who got married when they were 16 and they're still married.
That's my brother.
I mean, it's different. See, this is why you got to take a case-by-case basis. They investigate this stuff. They talk to people. You got people at 30 years old. They're not ready for marriage. They're too immature.
So where do you base your decision? Where does the church base her decision?
By talking to psychologists. They talk to psychologists. It's just not some priest or deacon making these decisions. It works like a whole court of law. That they get all this information, and then they go with the judges around, and they discuss it. They got somebody for you, and they got somebody for the ex, and they're bringing up different points. And besides all of this, after the annulment is granted in your diocese, then it's sent to another diocese for them to review. And then if the ex want to fight it, they could demand that it goes to Rome for review. Yes.
You know, maybe I could add something that might help a little bit with this in terms of the decision. From a philosophical standpoint, the church favors marriage. So in other words, the church is going to kind of assume that it's a sacramental marriage, and the case that's brought up for annulment has to prove that one of those things were not in existence. So that's kind of the balance that's put.
Annulment has to prove.
Correct. You have to
Canon
prove
law
it somehow.
states that a marriage is sacramental as long as you've been before a priest or a deacon. You've got to show, for some reason, that it was not. Yeah.
Well, what if the other person remarried already?
Got nothing to do with that.
And they could still,
It has nothing to do with them. You're asking for the annulment. And if your annulment is granted, then their annulment is granted also, for them also. So they could get married in church.
so I'm assuming my ex-husband never got married in church then. Because I never been notified that.
Adultery and clear cut for an annulment, either.
No. It's never anything that happens after marriage. It's at the time of marriage.
It's never after.
That's the whole sacrament. The sacrament is the time when you are standing before the priest or deacon. What is going through your head at the time you're before there? They ask you the questions. Are you freely entering into the sacrament of marriage? Are you open to having children? Are you willing to make a lifelong commitment? And therefore, the church says you have said yes to all these questions. Therefore, you are in a sacramental marriage. Now, what happens if you get a divorce and you remarry, or you want to get remarried? Then you've got to show that at the time you said those words, you weren't. Like I said, the one guy, while he's saying those words, his mistress was probably in the audience, in the congregation. Okay?
But there's a case, and I was a witness. I actually functioned as a witness. We are in the Philippines. They got married. It was, I think, a very sacramental marriage. In the Catholic Church, they've been engaged for a very long time. So she left to the Philippines, to the States. I mean, they stayed together for a few weeks. She left for the Philippines, to the United States. Eventually, waiting for his visa, he committed adultery.
Yeah.
And they divorced. She opted for a divorce. And she remarried here based on that divorce. And I became a witness because a close friend of mine became the other woman in this case.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And so I saw that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was a good protest, And so, but the thing is that, maybe because there was a divorce already involved. But I think the main reason was, of course, is the adultery and the broken marriage. I don't know why.
It's not what happens after marriage. See, the church doesn't ask, it calls for love, okay? The church doesn't say you've got to be in this Hollywood romantic love. It's not that romantic love. It's a love for a person. That you're freely making this commitment for a lifelong commitment you know, and you're open to having children. Yeah. But
That
yeah,
was the situation.
were they granted a divorce on an annulment?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
most definitely.
Well, there were other circumstances that they brought up, and it had nothing to do. They may have not been, it may have happened before the marriage too. We don't always know some of this stuff. You
I
know,
think I was the only witness. And
there are probably other
what
witnesses.
what I factually said was the fact that he did commit this adultery.
Yeah.
He did run away with another woman
Yeah.
who was a friend.
Yeah, but it's not what happens
But
after the
that's
marriage.
not the only
It's
thing
at
I
the time of
can
the
say.
marriage.
Yeah, so
And
that's why
that's
I'm
the thing.
asking whether
Yeah.
you're saying at the moment of marriage, but then this happened.
Well, they ask other things, but see, they investigate more things and they find out. Believe me, they did. They did. You know, there have been cases of people get married and they find out that the woman never wanted, or the guy never wanted to have children, and didn't tell their spouse.
There's been a question
Yeah.
over here for a while.
I have a question. Would there be an annulment if one of the spouse would like to have children and the other spouse cannot have children? So can there be an annulment?
No. If one spouse wants children and the other one doesn't or can't.
No, it cannot have
Okay,
children.
no. Whether or not you can bear children does not, is that you're open to have children. Okay? You get two people who are 65 years old and you're getting married in church. And one of the things they're asked, you know,
Yeah, but that's.
are you willing to have children? I'm 65. No, the thing is, are you open to have, if you were younger, would you be open to having children? It doesn't say you've got to be able to bear children. All you got to do is be able to carry out, you got to be able to have sex. And if you're not old, we can't have it. But when you're older, it assumes that if you were younger, you would be open to having children.
I think her question is, would it be a basis for annulment if
No.
one spouse cannot bear children?
No, it is not. It's not. It doesn't say you've got to bear children. It's got to be open to have. Yes.
How about if one person later on, you find out that has been using chemicals,
Pardon me?
has been doing some kind of chemicals, like addiction?
That's right.
So,
And you have cases, yeah. Were they in their right mind? If they were on drugs, no.
okay.
See, that's what's taken into account.
My question is, I'm just curious.
All I
If
know
you're in a
is
different
I'm
religion,
okay.
like let's say you Baptist,
I'm not gonna get,
Yes.
I don't go up with anyone.
so
Don't go up with
they,
anyone.
and they want to divorce,
Don't
they don't have to
remarry.
worry about
Don't marry,
annulment
no.
because they're married to a different church.
No. Remember I said in that paperwork, you get, if you're a Catholic and you want to marry somebody who's not a Catholic, you get permission from the bishop. And he will give you permission to get.
Now, what I understand that, Deacon, my question is, if you, let's say I'm a Baptist,
Yes.
and I don't have this, and I'm going to marry another Baptist, and I'm going to divorce, and should I worry about annulment because I'm a Baptist, or?
If you want to become a Catholic,
Oh, okay, so
yeah.
just different forget about different religions, just being Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, it got divorced. Okay, you got two Baptists get married.
Yeah,
They get a divorce.
yeah.
Now, does the one wants to become a Catholic?
Well, the one of the Baptists, the male, had, wanted, because it wasn't like his choices. but because of her strong tradition that she wanted to get married in Catholic church.
Okay, they want to get married. He has to get an annulment. Remember I said, to baptized people, not necessarily Catholic. Baptist is recognized, baptism, valid baptism in the Catholic Church. He would have to go through an annulment just as if he were a Catholic. Because we're talking about a sacramental marriage is between two baptized people.
So if you're in a different religion and you got married, so like us being Catholic, we have the one of the sacraments that we receive is the matrimony, right?
Right.
Baptism and so on and so on. And if you're in a different religion and you got married, is that meaning that they're receiving the same sacraments that we have as they're non-Catholic?
It's recognized.
That way.
Marriages, sacramental marriages of other faith are recognized as by the Catholic Church. Same way with baptism. Baptism is recognized by other Christian denominations as valid in the Catholic Church. This is why at the Easter time, they don't be rebaptized. They make what we call a profession of faith. That I was baptized in this faith, now I am turning my allegiance to the Catholic faith.
Wow. I know this is a hot topic, that's why we gave the whole school of leaders to Deacon. And I know there's more questions, so
Yeah.
why don't we, table it. If you have more questions, then I can redirect it to and email it to Deacon so we can.
Or just ask your priest or deacon. I'm not the only one of the answers.
That's fine, you can bring it as well.
Deacon Steve.
Yeah, and if I don't know, I'll get the answer for you. I'll ask every, he'll ask it for you.
I'm just not bashful about standing up in front of people to do this.
Yes. No, we appreciate it very much.
We're so blessed to have Deacon, and thank you so much. Okay, let's have a 5-minute break and then we'll go.